It's Pride Month. We are not going to waste any time in celebrating and getting some of the queer leaders in the fishing industry together. The fishiness is very high. The levels are high with this group.
My name is Demisha Dennis. Pronouns are she, her. I run an organization called Brown Girl Outdoor World, again, based out of Toronto.
My name is Shelley. Pronouns she, her, they. I'm from Toronto as well. One of a handful of fly fishy folks here in the fly fishing scene repping queer and BIPOC folks on the river.
I'm 73 years old. I transitioned at the age of 69 and have never been as happy as I am now in my life. And I'm excited to be, I've been a fly fisherman for a number of years, and now I'm a fly fishing woman.
My name's J. Michelle Swope. Pronouns are she, her. I've been a guide and a fly fishing instructor for a long time. I'm currently a fly shop owner. I am an educator by degree, and I do a lot of things with United Women on the Fly. I helped Heather when we first started United, and now I'm with iFishiBelong as our advocacy committee lead. And then I do a lot of conservation work around wild and anadromous fish with and for Trout Unlimited here in the States and in Washington State.
My name's Annie. My pronouns are they and them and theirs. I live in Denver. I grew up fishing way up north in Minnesota and fishing for pike and bass, crappie mostly, kind of just good fish to go as shore lunch. The way I got into this group was, not finding a space where I felt like I could fully be myself or be treated a little bit differently because of, walking into a fly shop and not quite matching the Rocky Mountain Front Range bro aesthetic. But I am happy to have found this group. The beautiful communities that I've developed. I know there's at least one connection here, multiple connections in here to Brown Girl Outdoor World. And we also have iFishiBelong. All Kids Fish has been mentioned already, that we had this weekend an event, and we had our DIY event in Maupin, Oregon, fishing for red side trout. Maybe we can just go around and introduce yourself. Demisha, would you like to start?
Sure, I will go ahead. My name is Demisha Dennis. Pronouns are she, her. I'm calling into you from the city of Toronto, which is held on Indigenous territories here. I won't do a disservice and read the city's land acknowledgement, and I won't try to go ahead and name them all off on my own because I am still in my own ways familiarizing myself and remembering all the names and all the various communities that still exist, and are stewards of the lands on which we live, work, and play. I am a community builder, community leader, at some point, I'm sure this will come out at some point, a award-winning conservationist for my work in fishing. And I am a mom to a 20-year-old human who is also just caught her first trout on the fly because she refused to fly fish for the longest time. So she just caught her first one. She said when she wants to catch fish, she'll go spin fishing. So hey, I'll leave her to her own devices. I run an organization called Brown Girl Outdoor World, again, based out of Toronto. And that is my little intro for now.
My name is Shelley. Pronouns she, her, they. I'm from Toronto as well, downtown Toronto. A little bit about me. Yeah, I'm just one of a handful of fly fishy folks here in the fly fishing scene, I guess, repping queer and BIPOC folks on the river. In Toronto and area, there's a handful of us. There's not many. We always want it to grow. And that's kind of the reason we're here today and some of the work I do with Demisha.
First off, I want to say that this is a thrill for me to be with this group. I'm very excited. I'm not in my 20s or 30s, okay? I'm 73 years old. I transitioned at the age of 69 and have never been as happy as I am now in my life. And I'm excited to be, I've been a fly fisherman for a number of years, and now I'm a fly fishing woman. And I'm proud of it and happy for it. I've met the most wonderful people, and I can't wait to meet the rest of them in Colorado or Montana or maybe even out east here where the real trout fishing is. Okay, J. Michelle, take it away.
Sorry, Danielle, I should have had myself on mute. You said that, it made me laugh. My name's J. Michelle Swope. Pronouns are she, her. I fish for a lot of things with a lot of things. I'll just be upfront about that. I just, at the beginning of last week, fished for lingcod, black cod, and halibut off the coast of Washington here using a spin reel and an electric reel. So I fish for a lot of things with a lot of things, but fly fishing is my actual favorite thing to do. I started when I was 7, and that was only because I couldn't hold still really well, and fly fishing really worked for me because there was a lot of movement. It also meant I was a really terrible caster for a really long time because I didn't know what I was doing. I've been a guide and a fly fishing instructor for a long time. I'm currently a fly shop owner, having bought a fly shop a couple months ago, and I'm running a different guide service. I am an educator by degree, and I do a lot of things with United Women on the Fly. I helped Heather when we first started United, and now I'm with iFishiBelong as our advocacy committee lead. And then I do a lot of conservation work around wild anadromous fish with and for Trout Unlimited here in the States and in Washington State. And I also participate in my own Trout Unlimited chapter.
Thanks, y'all, for your introductions. I'll keep mine super brief because I'm playing MC today and want to hear from y'all about your experiences in the fishing community. But my name's Annie. My pronouns are they and them and theirs. I live in Denver. I grew up fishing way up north in Minnesota and fishing for pike and bass, crappie mostly, kind of just good fish to go as shore lunch. The way I got into this group was, not finding a space where I felt like I could fully be myself or be treated a little bit differently because of, walking into a fly shop and not quite matching the Rocky Mountain Front Range bro aesthetic. But I am happy to have found this group, and I have some questions too. I'm with iFishiBelong and Brown Girl Outdoor World. I want to know from all of y'all what those communities mean and how have those shaped your sense of community and belonging in not just any space, but in fishing spaces. Let's see, I'm going to start with Demisha. So being the founder of BGOW, creating space for Black, Indigenous, and people of color to find community out in the outdoors, especially women. I just saw you star in Get Hooked, a documentary series featuring 6 anglers exploring mental health benefits of fishing, queerness, nature, perspectives that challenge outdoor stereotypes. I would love to know from you as a Black queer woman, how have your personal experiences inspired you to build this community? How have they fueled that fire for you?
Thank you for, that film was Shelly was supposed to be there with me, but Shelly has this thing where Shelly injures herself when we have, really big things to do.
My bad.
And then, so the Get Hooked series, I was approached by the filmmaker Heidi Lynch, and I got to host a group of women from the UK, a group of queer women from the UK. One of the stars in the film was also Faye, which is Heidi's partner as well. They have been featured in films from Star Wars, the Andor series, Game of Thrones, some really big films. I saw all of that, and I was like, a dope human who also fly fishes or wants to learn to fly fish, and they chose me. Bet. So I agreed to do that film. We were fishing in Ontario, and then when they said Ontario is our province. It's your state or province. And we had just the most amazing time fishing here at home and seeing just like how they gravitated towards the joy that I experienced in the outdoors and how we were able to share that. We also were fishing on in a place where one of the folks who's featured in the film, Christine, she's an Algonquin woman, and where we were fishing, she was showing us where her family used to mine for quartz in that very same area to produce some of the tools that they would use at home. So there was a ton of history and joy and community that just happened naturally based on where we were with, and the fact that these were 4 women who came from the UK, had 0 experience fishing in Ontario, and I got to put I think almost everyone on their first bass. That was pretty exciting for me, and to see them try to do something that they've never done before, which is fish for bass, do that out here in nature. And I mean, the bald eagle that I paid to show up showed up in the film. So I think everything just worked out perfectly in that way. I think you asked about BGOW as well in the same
Yeah, well,
context of that.
my next question is, so in an article from Autostraddle, they wrote about you in a piece called "Fishing is for Everyone." I was curious if you could expand on this quote from you from Autostraddle's. Demisha's perspective in Get Hooked challenges uniquely the ideas of who gets to occupy the outdoors, and like you said, I loved what you said about that contagious joy. And all you have to do is get hooked on one bass, and that's literally the name of the series. So I was curious if you could expand on joy in the outdoors. Who's allowed? Who's more likely or less likely to be in the outdoors?
Yeah. So for me, I started out fishing when I had moved to Canada from Jamaica, and I had no concept of what fly fishing, like fishing period was. I saw fishing more of the commercial side, where I've never had an interaction with a fishing rod. The person would go out, catch a fish, bring them in. My grandma would purchase a fish, and that would be my interaction with it. When I came to Canada, mine was a rebellion against going to church, simply put. Didn't want to go to church. I had to find an activity to do. I went into, this was, again, I'm only 24, so I don't know how this like chalks up, but I was in a store before they had the internet fully accessible to all of us. And I went to the library and I was searching up information on what it took to start fishing. And my first fishing was before I did the research, it was with a piece of stick, a fish crochet thread, and a safety pin, because that's what I thought was going to catch me some fish. Needless to say, I caught 0 zip zilch, and from that I tried and I learned more. Fast forward to me being a whole adult and going into the outdoors, and my first fishing experience, I was spin fishing somewhere, and of course the commentary that like someone driving by in a car said to me, I was like, okay, this is a sign that there needs to be more of me. I was going camping, all the time going camping. All my friends, none of them looked anything like me. I was going hiking, no one looked like me. My solution to that was to create more of a story around who belongs in the outdoors. I'm not seeing anyone, I'm not hearing anyone. And so I created Brown Girl Outdoor World. I created Brown Girl Outdoor World at a time when I was in a very hetero-presenting relationship. I've never felt a need to come out because I've always been queer and always been in queer relationships. And then when I moved into creating space in BGOW, I saw where, again, but there wasn't that cohesiveness in identity showing up in the outdoors. You could be one thing. So now I've changed the narrative about women being in the outdoors. What else can I do? So there's a woman, and now I'm a queer Black woman in the outdoors. What do? I use the visibility and the knowledge and the information that I've gained and the partnerships that I've created to say, hey, yes, I am apparently very straight presenting. I'm in this very straight presenting relationship, but I'm creating space for all of us. And I found when I open that conversation more to say, this is for queer folks as well, people started gravitating towards that. You didn't have to be defined under any specific umbrella. You're queer, you belong here. And so we continued with that narrative through all our programming. I mean, part of that, I met Shelly. I didn't think Shelly knew I was queer when we met. She was outside a fly fishing shop and during the pandemic, and she kind of grabbed me by a ponytail and pulled me into the store and said, hey, we're going fishing together. And that's how our story started. Our story has been that we met outside a fishing shop, and she is a part of the BGOW community. And yeah, that's been our storytelling, just expanding on who gets to be outside, when they're outside, how they feel, how we're thinking about what safety looks like, physical and psychological, and to create safer spaces. I always say we can't create safe spaces, but we can create safer spaces so that people can see their stories told.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. That is perfect, because I want to ask Shelly about Friends and Flies. So you established this fly tying club in 23. It's described on your Instagram as a tying club for the homies. I wish that I was in your area so I could show up and kick it with you guys, because that sounds really chill. And I myself have tried to go to community tying events at my local fly shops. I don't know if any of y'all have ever experienced tying in a circle of a bunch of folks who don't look like you and don't really have a whole lot in common in terms of identity. But when it does happen, right, when you do get some folks together that feel like they can belong in a space, Shelley, how has that shaped you as an angler?
Similar to what Demisha was sharing about why she created BGOW, I created that tying club, Flies and Friends, kind of play on friends and family, because I live 8 minutes from our local fly shop, which is, the only one in Toronto. And so I'm always at their events. I'm always just there at the store quite a lot, but wasn't seeing myself represented, right? So joining the tying club's great, but I always felt this, I don't want to say ick because that's a strong word, but it definitely felt like that sometimes, and especially at first. And then eventually you become more comfortable with the crowd, but I never felt I was represented. And I wanted to create a space where it didn't feel as intimidated as I felt, right? So if I feel intimidated, I'm super fishy and I'm not new to fly tying, but no matter how many fly tying events I go to in these spaces, I still feel weird. I can't imagine what that's like for people who are just getting into it, or people like myself who aren't shown in the scene a lot. I do it, I host at my work, so it's a space that I'm super comfortable in, not a random space, and friends' houses as well. It's just my friends right now. And I prioritize, of course, folks that I trust, my friend group, but also folks of color. So, for our first demo that we brought in a special guest, I wanted to make sure it was a person of color and not a white male, just like every other tying club that's in there. And I keep it small on purpose because I know that a big group can be really intimidating. Right. So that was my main goal on that. And it is, it's something that comes and goes with the seasons. Some seasons are more tying seasons than fishing seasons, especially in our winter. So it's something that is work to keep going, be honest, work to bring folks in that are going to demo and want to present. But I think it's worth it. And I'm getting requests all the time from folks that my friends or not even, Instagram friends, like, how can I join and things like that. And I'm often trying to remind them that, like, yeah, I would love for you to join, but there's a cap on how many folks I can have at work. And I want to prioritize first women and people of color. Right. So it's reminding them like, yeah, this isn't your normal tying club. And not everyone loves hearing that because they'll say, okay, when the time is right, let me know. And I was like, okay, I will. But the time for me, my priority is around folks of color and women in that group, at least any new members.
That's wonderful. And it's also so cool to have you and Demisha here together to kind of expand on, both of your sides of the fishing experience and what your collaboration has meant. And it seems that you've held some space for affirming positive impact on folks and tyers, especially for beginners. Like you said, that's so important because it can turn people away. It can feel icky for sure.
And I think the great thing about that club is it's to know that it doesn't need to be intimidating. It can just be friends, right? You don't have to have all the materials, and sharing is caring. Because even myself, even though my wife would say I have too many tying materials, and since we moved, it's like the biggest category other than the kitchen. But I don't have everything, especially, tying classics and stuff like that. I don't have all those materials and all those feathers. So it's nice to just share and know that, like, you can still tie these old classic patterns without spending all that money or sourcing all that material. And it helps me work on my presenting skills, which I think is important.
So, Jay Michelle, you're also somebody who's historically held space in places where it hasn't always felt welcoming. You just recently bought your own fly shop, and I would love to hear a little bit about how, since I got to meet you in person this weekend, which was such a joy, what I heard from you in your kind of elevator pitch, $90 round trip from the airport to get to the gas station down the street from my shop. And I'm also a guide. And, we want to make it easy for people and make it accessible. And I think when you talk about your queerness, being queer as the day is long, and showing up unapologetically as yourself, what does that mean to see that in others when you have created that space?
Well, I don't know if this is going to directly answer your question, but
that's okay. It's a panel.
Well, sorry. I was thinking about this when I read these notes, you know, and I've been around a bit. So I just turned 15. I started fly fishing, like I said, when I was 7. And I started fly fishing when I was 7. As a girl, there was no internet. There was the public library. So 2 things I learned in the public library when I was 7 was what fly fishing was and what being queer was. Because I was curious desperately about both. So, and I was so in such a space rural and also very religious that kind of seeking aloud on the queer side of things was not welcome in any way. I had enough sense to hide it, but I would read about things, try to find things in public library, and then hide the books that I was reading. And I sort of equate that with fly fishing because I sort of discovered both kind of simultaneously. And that's been true ever since I've advanced as a human being. I don't know if I ever thought that I had that option not to hold space for others. So that's an interesting thing too as well. And I think that's just part of my makeup. I'm fairly stubborn. I'm fairly opinionated. And I got sick real fast to being ignored at best, ignored in fly shops as a girl and as a woman. And it wasn't, to be honest with you, it wasn't until like the mid to late 2000s that started to shift. I'm used to battle. Like I'm used to walking into outdoor spaces and places that are supposed to be welcoming and that allegedly want my money and having to fight for what I am trying to get. And everyone's nodding because you all have the same experience, I'm going to guess, in one way or another. I hate that. And I mean, with a passion unrivaled, I hate. So when we started United Women and then we morphed into iFishiBelong, that became just like, I just felt like I finally had community and some more tools to be able to try and create spaces. And I love, Demisha, I think you said safer spaces, because that's it. There are no safe spaces, but safer spaces is so key. And so when we started to do that, that was my first ever sort of like feeling of like, I was finally like, things were finally aligned and I was finally able to take all these pieces that I've been working on for years, found a community that wanted to do the same thing. And then I can see that we can affect change together. So now when we talk about holding space, now it becomes for me even more important that I pay more attention to things that I have control over. Well, guess what? I just bought a fly shop. Let's not talk about how smart that was. But let's talk about what the opportunity is afforded, right? The opportunity right now for me is to actually put things into place that we as United Brown Girl Outdoor World, iFishiBelong, have talked about for years. We talk about being inclusive. We talk about getting folks into fly fishing, reducing barriers, removing barriers, all that stuff. I finally get to actually physically put that into play in terms of like signs on the window of my shop, the words I use in my website. Like I'm doing what I wish I would have discovered when I was 7 years old. So that's a beautiful thing for me. The one thing that I really want to stress is that there are lots of places and businesses and groups that say that they are safer places for folks like us. And I get the intent and I believe that they believe that's true. And that is not necessarily true. And one of the things that I just want to put out there is that there's a lot of work to be done. And I love and appreciate folks that want to be more inclusive, but inclusivity and becoming and wanting to be more inclusive comes with a responsibility, I feel, to ensure that actually we are truly being inclusive. And when we make invitations around inclusivity, we can actually back that invitation up with reality. So that's all. Little diatribe there, and I'm done.
No, thank you. I can feel your passion over here. And I feel that, when we talk about living authentically and being able to show up as our queer true selves in spaces, just a little bit of, at a very basic level, queer theory will emphasize the fluid, the performed nature of sexuality, gender identity, and gender expression. And so we question being queer in our nature. Folks like us, we question those norms and those categories that are binary, those categories that are not always challenged in, sometimes maybe in a siloed way, but not always intersectionally. When you show up in the world. Dale, I want to also ask your visibility, your presence as a trans woman and a leader, being a manager for Orvis, being a program lead for Becca Sue Klein's All Kids Fish. What personal journey and visibility in the last, it sounds like it's been relatively recent since you transitioned. How has that shaped the way that you continue to show up at work, in fishing communities, and et cetera?
I want to say that, Jay Michelle, that was fantastic what you just said. And I think that you can probably relate a little bit more to some of the things I'm going to say than Demisha and Shelley and Annie, because of our age differences. Demisha, Shelley, Annie, you are so lucky to be growing up in this time. If you think it's very difficult and tough now to be accepted and to get that exposure, when I was growing up, it was a death sentence. There was no way I could have come out in the 1950s and 60s and say I want to become a female. It just couldn't happen. I grew up on a farm. It was a different world, a completely different world. And this world is not that great right now, but it was a lot worse. I am so happy and excited to be able to have taken the step, gotten the courage, not necessarily the courage, but I just felt I couldn't live any longer without doing what I did. And I am so glad that I did, because the fact that I've transitioned and worked for Orvis. Orvis is I was a teacher for 38 years. I taught middle school kids. The last 9 years working for Orvis has opened my eyes to the way things can be run. Orvis, talk about a company that accepts diversity. It is Orvis. I actually called them and ahead of time before my surgery, and I wanted to tell people in corporate before I told my immediate boss what I was going to do. It was very nerve-wracking, even before I told my friends. And the supervisor at Orvis, her name was Jamie, she couldn't understand why I was going to quit. She said, "Listen, Dale." And I said, "Well, I don't want my transition to affect the business." And she says, "It's not going to, because if it does, we don't want that business." And that's Orvis's ideals. And that gave me the courage to go through my transition, be out for 2 months, and come back into the workshop, dressed completely different and feeling real and alive, and having everyone, all my customers, accept me. And it's been joyous. And now to where we're at now with iFishiBelong, when Heather and Becca asked me to be a part of this and help with the All Kids Fish, it was like a door opening up. I look at fly fishing, the fly fishing community, as a community that, for the most part, for years and years and years, it was an old white man organization. I'm looking at it now. When somebody shows up in my shop, my Orvis store, male, female, black, white, Hispanic, it doesn't make any difference. I have an event every single Saturday and open it to everybody, and it's changed my world. I'm happy that I transitioned. I'm happy that I work for Orvis. I'm happy that I'm able to get other people involved.
Thank you, Dale. That is a powerful story. I appreciate your sharing your experience. You talked a little bit about being out, and Demisha, you mentioned when you started Brown Girl Outdoor World, you were pushing maybe a little bit further from the straight presenting identity or the expression that folks were seeing. And I'm just curious to know, what happens when we do lean into that discomfort and we do lean into leaping out into a new space. Dale, you just talked about that, making a leap that feels impossible when you don't know what's on the other side. But now that y'all are on the other side of it, does anybody have, especially the folks with Brown Girl Outdoor World, how have you learned to use your voice since you have passed that threshold?
I'll speak from my perspective. At 40, I was in a 15-year relationship, and I decided that I needed to live for who I was in the truest part of myself. And so I ended a over 15-year relationship and decided that I wanted to fully lean into who I was and live on my terms. And in doing that, I realize that there are so many others who are seeking a community that would say, hey, I've had a story. I didn't know how to tell it. I didn't know where I could tell it and feel safe in doing so. And so I found, speaking through BGOW, that I found more folks who had organically come to BGOW because it created what seemed like a safer space for them, who are queer, who are trans, who just exist in the most beautiful parts of who they are, and gravitated towards a community because that's how we existed. I think for what I've seen for myself is I feel so expansive. I feel like there's nothing that is beyond what I can do when I stand in this place. It feels like there's nothing that would challenge me enough that I would back away from it when I see the result. It feels like there's just an enormous amount of, again, joy that can exist in the spaces that we create, because we know what it is to be in the silence, and we know what it is to live out loud, and we know what it is to hold space for people who want to live it out as loud as they can, but for every other reason that exists in the world, they can't. So we find ourselves, I find myself living stronger for those people than the people who are already out, because I feel like there's a story that exists there that doesn't get shared, that doesn't get held, that doesn't get like celebrated as for those of us who are already out and quite visible. So even within the loud spaces that we exist at BGOW, there's still the silence for you being queer and showing up, and it not having to be the wholeness of your story, or you being trans and it not having to be the wholeness of the story for everyone else to see, but know that there's a quiet, silent place there where your story is held with so much care, and that we're making sure that that place feels, again, safer for you to actually do what you need to do to feel seen.
Yes, thank you. Wow, I love that. Does anybody else have something to talk about seeing yourself in an organization that is a mirror, that is like everything that you've been thinking? I say this because this weekend there was a team member with iFishiBelong who whipped out the old guitar and started singing original songs about United Women on the Fly, and I was like, oh my gosh, like these lyrics, like I was looking for a group with other women that I could fish with, other people that I could fish with, that I don't see that it already exists. What does it mean to be that mirror for people who isn't normally seen in the space? What role have these communities played in helping you to be, to be seen, to help others be seen, especially where representation is still lacking and is still kind of slowly, very gradually kind of ticking up for non-white hetero males?
Having been a white male in the fly fishing community for most of my life, and now being a woman and wholeheartedly jumping into representing my community, I find it very important for me to let everyone know how welcoming, and my goal is I want to open fly fishing up to everybody. But I also want to I want to take those old white guys, as we'll say it, as we will call them, and open their eyes a little bit and realize that the rest of this community is what's going to make the fly fishing community better and more welcoming and more diverse. And we all need that. We have to have it. If we're going to, we should be a window for the rest of the world with our acceptance of diversity. And I hope we can be. And iFishiBelong is going to do it.
We try. That's part of the mission, as J. Michelle knows well, in the advocacy committee. Speaking of advocacy, so we're talking about learning to use your voice, learning to hold the space and find a way for folks to tell their stories. what does advocacy look like? You know, is it really practical for you? Is it more of like allyship work? What does it look like for the queer community, especially, to be supported through advocacy programs or organizations that aim for that in their mission?
I think I keep reminding folks that allyship is an action word.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely requires tangible. We can't say we're allies. I actually had started hating that word because it became just another checkbox, another we say it, so therefore we are it. And that is danger. And that produces so much harm in how we move through advocacy spaces. You'll find and I talk about it in terms of conservation. When we talk about conservation, you have the theoretical part of conversation of conservation, and you have the laws that need to be made for people to actually be able to do conservation work. But when you think of it, you have people on the streams rebuilding riverbanks, you have people working in fisheries, you have people on the ground with hands and feet getting dirty. That is the kind of work that we need to see when it comes to talking about allyship for really diverse communities. So whether it be we're talking about diversity in queerness, diversity in gender, diversity in racialized representation, whatever that diversity looks like for you. Like we forget that even when we talk about bringing women into spaces, simply women, no racial identifier attached, no gender differences, nothing. That is a diverse move. Bringing a woman into a space such as fly fishing, like J. Michelle owning her own fly shop. If she walks into a space, that is a diversity action, right? Because now J. Michelle is here as a person who that would have never been the story, right? So that is something that speaks to diversity. And I think we need to remember that, like, yeah, it is an action word. And what J. Michelle has done is taken very tangible action to change what that narrative looks like in that space. What Dale has done, very tangible actions within the space of working in Orvis, which it has been, we know has been a very male dominated, centered, even, you know, one of my things when I started fly fishing, and I remember when I first saw Orvis, and I don't remember what the trip was, and it's going to sound terrible, but hey, I saw a bus full of old white men, and it was like a bus full, and I was like, this is not something that I would ever touch with a 10-foot pole because they don't know me and I've never had an opportunity to know them. And I can tell that it would have been a harder space to tell my story if the opportunity ever presented itself. But when I know that people who exist in that space like Dale and are doing active and tangible work to show up and talk about what it looks like to be represented and talk about what it looks like to be truly diverse, then I know someone is taking that conversation from allyship into making a very tangible action. And I think that's what we need. We need less sayers and more doers of that allyship.
J. Michelle, I know you're working on some things with your committee. I would love to hear more about what allyship as a verb, or to be an ally, to be an advocate, looks like as a queer angler for you.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Thank you. And Demisha, that was outstanding. Thank you for those words. It's exactly right. Anytime I hear someone say I'm an ally, I'm like, oh boy, how did you are not. Danger.
Name 3 songs.
Right. Advocacy, I think, is a scary word. And this just in my experience of trying to do grassroots organizing around conservation, around diversity, equity, inclusion, gender equity work, any of that, when the word advocacy comes up or is spoken, people just, there's a barrier there. And I still work on trying to figure out different ways to talk about advocacy without using the word advocacy, but here we go. Advocacy is actually can be amazingly simple. And it absolutely is an action word, right? So with our committee right now, we're trying to take some layers off the word advocacy and talk about super simple, feet on the ground, hands in the dirt, things that we can do to actually make a difference. Even organizing a trash pickup in a local park can be an act of advocacy. And there's lots of layers to it, but it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be difficult. And it doesn't have to be frightening. There are pieces of advocacy, let me just tell you, that are frightening, right? That's where we go into the not safe spaces when we speak our truth. That's where we stand before our city council or our game commissions or our other federal or state entities and demand a right to be in these spaces and be safe in these spaces. That part is scary, not gonna lie. But there are other easier and less scary ways to advocate, and there's a need for all of it. So our committee currently, and please anyone come and maybe take a peek, join us, just come and talk to us. We're trying to fashion a starter kit, if you will, a toolkit, a manual, whatever you want to call it. There's some plug and play things in there that will invite anyone that is interested at all in advocating for ways to do it and examples of and templates for. And that is just really, truly what our committee is trying to produce. We need something that is tangible, something that is helpful, and something that is a living, breathing document and or toolkit that will exist, and we will continue to add to it. It's so very important that we continue to speak and our voices be heard, and it's so very important that we find diverse ways that people can participate in advocacy. It's not just a one tool. It's not just a one way. There's so many different ways. That was a long-winded way of saying, I know some ways, y'all know some ways. We need to put these ways together, but also there are some things that we're probably not even thinking of. We need more voices to come in and really talk about ways that we can have more action items around improving our spaces, our sport, our way of being in the world together. That's an invitation. Just give us your thoughts. Give me your thoughts. Give any of us your thoughts, please.
Thank you for that. I think the invitation to transparency, especially in nonprofit work, but, you know, as Dale is saying, in corporate work as well, where the dollars are truly being made. And I think using our voices and using our time, our resources to make an impact is something that we, as we, especially as we move further into this year, we've already have 900 bills against queer and trans people that have been authored. So people have thought of these things, and they want these things to happen to our community and keep us in our homes, to keep us scared. Re-establish that there are some unsafe spaces, and that, well, there are no safe spaces like you mentioned, but when it comes to the fishing industry, I used to work in advertising, so I'm really accustomed to hearing some of the talk that big companies, big brands can do. When we talk about creating safer, more inclusive, more affirming spaces, especially for queer anglers, what can organizations do on a practical level, but also with their money to help support queer anglers? Are there any other organizations they could partner with that you guys want to highlight?
You know, it's voting with your dollars is how I'm going to phrase it. So if an organization says that they hold with justice, equity, diversity, inclusion statements and values, then my curiosity suddenly becomes, then where do they spend their money? How do they invest their money? How do they spend their money? And how do they truly support? So I'm always a little bit curious about that. I think that organizations can make a difference monetarily. I also think that potentially, like Annie, I love the fact that we're in advertising and that, because there are so many words that have such power, right? And we spend a lot of time listening and looking at corporate logos and corporate statements about diversity and inclusion and justice. And we're just like, oh, really? That's the best you could do? Like, there's something about words still that are either written or spoken coming from corporations that I feel truly could be so much better and so much more powerful and impactful. So that would be my wish. If I ruled the world in that regard, I would certainly want to guide any corporations or even smaller nonprofit organizations to really sort of pay attention and to the words and the affirmations, shall we say, that are given more than just in June, but truly, yeah. The 11 more months in the year, that's something that I pay attention to anyway.
I think that, if you don't mind, Jay and Michelle, you say a lot, and you're absolutely right. But I think necessarily want me to say that I think we've come a long way, but I know that we've come a long way, and we have a lot further to go. And I think some of the corporations, I know that Orvis, they send out memos all the time. I've just been asked to be part of their Jedi. We're having a big meeting on Friday, and it's how to word things, how we want to reach out and let everybody know. And more companies are starting to not worry about stepping on toes and speak their mind and do the right thing. I hope I'm part of that.
Yeah, I think that is something to be proud of, to be involved in a company that shares your values, and appreciate hearing from your perspective too. Now that all of y'all have shared your unique stories, I want to wrap this up by asking if there's one thing, and we'll keep this to a phrase or a short sentence, that you hope this audience of this campaign for I Fish, I Belong takes away from our panel today. What do you believe would be the most impactful insight, especially of folks who are sitting here watching who are not out, who are queer, who haven't found their community yet? What do you think the most impactful insight from today would be for them?
I think simply for me, you belong. And that is no questions asked, no,
Absolutely.
you belong.
Come on out and join us.
Call me.
Nature's for everyone, right? Like Demisha said.
And the fish couldn't give a rat's behind about what you look like, how you do it, or anything else. It's simply just get outside in nature. And if you don't start it, you won't know.
That's right.
Yes, I think that's something that I learned. This was the first time I got to meet Heather Hodson, was this weekend. I've been kind of following along with the journey of all these orgs coming together. And I made sure to mention to her that these events, it's so clear, like, yeah, it doesn't matter what you look like or where you're coming from. There is a place for folks to feel safer on the water, around the campfire, at the campsite, after all the fishing is done for the day. And I think nature being for everyone applies not just in queerness to animals that transition sexes, or we are those animals, and we are part of that larger web of being. So this is a great way to start Pride Month. I am feeling inspired, and I hope that our audience is too. Is there anything else, any other pieces of wisdom you wish you had known in your journey earlier as a queer person or as a leader in this outdoor space?
All fish are gay fish.
Yes, especially rainbow trout. Nice. I agree.
Nice. Join us. We're here. Just
Absolutely.
join us.
Yeah. I would say don't take it too seriously. I'm trying to remind myself that all the time. Demisha knows.
I was
just
about to say, Shelly, what do you
Stop it.
mean?
Yeah, it can just be fun. And I think I'm reminded of that the most when I plan like a fish without the boys, right? I try to do that. I talk to Demisha all the time. We're trying to plan to do that more often. Just create more spaces where it's just spaces where the men aren't there, and it's just more fun. It's less serious. I find myself less competitive in those times. Everyone else makes it easier to have fun. I don't know why I get more competitive when the men are around. Maybe I'm just trying to be better, catch bigger fish, which I do often.
Internal masculinity.
But I say, try not to take it so seriously. It doesn't have to be. It can just be fun. You don't have to catch fish. You'll learn something, even if you don't.
Even if you don't catch fish, yeah. I saw so many straight people, queer people, like get skunked this weekend on the Deschutes River, and we all still gathered around the campfire and shared a meal anyways. And the decades of experience just kind of waiting for folks to say, hey, I want to know more. I want to learn more. That's what I'm hearing. Is it sounds like, just ask the question, do the small thing, reach out on Instagram in a DM, ask how Shelly got started tying flies, or how Demisha won so many awards for conservation.
Just one. But yeah, and we're all learning. I think that's also a part of the thing, is that you never stop learning in fly fishing. You never stop learning in DEI spaces. Everyone shows up differently every time we go out on the water. Every water fishes differently every single day. Minute to minute, things change. So it's always a process of learning. But I think from fly fishing, what I can take and apply to life is that you never stop looking for the reasons to learn. For me, the fish, the fly, nothing eats the same thing at the same time of day. You're always changing out your fly, change your perspective, change how you show up, Change who you invite into the space. If you're always going out and everything looks the same at the same time of year, you'll never have to change anything about what you're seeing. So encourage people to invite people in, change what you see, and everything else around you will eventually change with it.
Very well said.
Yeah, I love that. I'm surprised that this is still recording, by the way. We have, if anyone has 5 more minutes to wax poetic about some of these things, because I think part of the beauty of nature and part of the beauty of being in nature for everyone is that like lack of perception. I love going out by myself. I love fishing by myself because it's one of the only ways as an anxious, attached, queer human that I feel okay being alone. But I think that the self-soothing that can come from it, the progress, the development that can come from always being aware that you have something to learn. My dad got to join us this weekend at the iFishiBelong DIY event in Oregon. We normally just go, last 2 or 3 years, we've gone on like a guided trip somewhere in Colorado, but I was like, why don't we try something different and find out how quick Dad can learn pronouns and how we can connect over fishing in such a vast array of humans and expressions and identities. And he absolutely thrived. I was like, did you ever think you'd fish with so many queer people before? And it was like, no. When I was younger fishing, like, yeah, you didn't want to be queer. That was a scary thing or a bad thing to be. But, we got our hats on and we're representing and we're out on the water. So I'm just so happy that this conversation has brought us together, the 5 of us. I know Michelle had to jump off, but this is wonderful. I think that queerness is such a strong magnet for all of us. And it's an instant like creating your own community because you couldn't find it when you were growing up. Like, yep, that's something that we all have been through.
Before we leave, I just want to say I want to fish with each and every one of you.
Yes, we should.
It would be a joy, Dale.
Bring it on.
I will make it a quest.
Yeah.
I mean, if those Orbis funds are rolling and they want to get a ranch in Montana, Dale, let's go.
Orvis should pay for it, absolutely.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we will definitely see each other. And I hope to see you, Annie, in Colorado.
Yes, hope so. All right.
If you're standing out on the street with your thumb out, I'll pick you up.
Okay.
And a pride flag extended on the arm. We'll know it's you.
I'll see you at Union Station in Denver with my fishing bag. Thank you for participating and can't wait to hopefully see all of y'all someday in person on the water.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Happy Pride, everyone.
Happy Pride.
Yay. Okay. Bye, y'all.
Bye.